Hi, this is Diane Carbo with Caregiver Relief, and today I have Alycia Martel with me. Alycia is a caregiver coach, end-of-life specialist, a death doula, which we will talk about in the future, and she's a podcast contributor. Alycia, I'm so excited to have you today, and I'm really excited about our topic. You are actively caregiving for your father. You've been a caregiver now for over 14 years. And you have a very unique story to tell. So I thought we'd start with that today. We're going to talk about caring for the caregiver. Tell us a little bit about what happened to you and how it affected you.
Over 3 years ago, I was in a car accident. I was in a position to be able to go back to work for a little bit of time. Now, previously, I worked in special education. I wasn't going back to that. I was driving for a private company that does school transportation for special needs children.
Okay, that came through. Good.
I was driving a regular minivan, the kind that anybody would own. I was parked at a stoplight. I was rear-ended pretty hard, set my van sideways, and I ended up with a really nasty concussion and severe whiplash. I'm still recovering from it. I ended up diagnosed with a TBI. That is a traumatic brain injury.
Yes.
I have post-concussive syndrome, which falls under that category. That happens when a concussion does not heal properly after a certain amount of time, which is generally agreed on as about 12 to 18 months. Concussions involve a lot more than a few days of headaches and needing to sleep for a week. It involves a lot. It involves basically everything, every system of your body, because as my neurologist put it, you have a chemical equivalent of a sandstorm in your head, but she didn't use the word sand. Wow, she was never more accurate. I've never heard anything more accurate in your life. It affected everything that I did, from my motor skills to my speech. Even now, as we're talking, I think I've shared with you offline here, I feel like I have aphasia, which interferes with word recall. I stutter, I slur, I drop my thoughts mid-sentence. There's a whole list of other things that fall under that one category alone. That there's the cognitive piece where you have something called brain fog, which is common with other illnesses too. You don't quite feel as if you're quote unquote here in the moment. That comes with some ADHD symptoms too. You can't concentrate, or hyper, you're scattered. I lost the names of common objects like drill bits. I forgot what a drill bit looked like. Now, I grew up, I married a master carpenter. I know my power tools. My boyfriend at the time was a tinkerer. He fixed items. I know my power tools. These are common objects in my world. I couldn't identify drill bits. I couldn't identify a screw gun. I would do, and I still do, random things to this day, such as put condiments from the kitchen in various places in the house. My short-term memory is pretty rough. I have mobility issues because I ended up with a vision disorder.
I want to make people aware that after a traumatic brain injury, something that most people don't know is that 18 months to 2 years after you have an injury, your brain, the scar tissue shrinks, and it also breaks the connections, the neural pathways. It breaks them as the scar tissue shrinks. So you start having new and different symptoms or worsening symptoms over a period of time as well. I've been in nursing for 50 years, and I did rehab nursing, so I worked with head injuries quite a bit up at Sister Kenny Institute in Minneapolis many years ago. So when you're telling me what's going on with you, I'm very familiar with your struggles. What amazes me even more is that you were caring for was it your dad at the time?
Yeah.
And you're back to caring for him as you're recovering.
Yeah, the first, obviously, several months, I had to take a back step. Now, my boyfriend of several years was living with us, and he was out of work. He had to step up big time and become the caretaker. Not only did I have my dad, but I had my daughter, and his daughter wasn't living with us full time at the moment, but was here on every other weekend. And he had to step up and take care of all of us. Let me tell you, my dad is a peach. He is pretty fun to be around. We have a good time here. We have a lot of laughs, and he likes to poke a lot of fun. You got to be able to take some good ribbon if you're around him. So that wasn't very hard, as he was already acclimated to him. But taking care of me, that was a different story. I needed a lot of actual physical work, whereas my dad is still very physically healthy. He's not very hands-on. I needed actual guidance just to get around the house because I had vertigo and no depth perception. So I was literally walking into things and falling back down. I was forgetting how to do simple things such as make a peanut butter jelly sandwich. I had to learn how to be in the kitchen all over again. So I wasn't allowed to be in the kitchen for a few months. He had to take over the cooking for the family. My daughter, who was a teenager, so that was fine, and she's been cooking since she was a child. He had to also learn how to get new communication styles because aphasia was so bad. I was mixing up my words big time. I would try to say, may I have a cup of coffee? And it would come out, coffee, may I have a cup of? So everybody around me was having to figure out what I was saying. Just words would come out of my mouth for no reason at all. And the days that he wasn't around, I would have to step up and try to take care of Dad. It got done. He was happy and healthy. That was pretty much just about it because then I would be so tired, I'd be on the couch.
I want caregivers to understand there's very many different kinds of aphasia. Basically, I'm just going to give them an overview. Receptive aphasia, and they don't understand what you're saying to them. You had expressive aphasia, which means your words just were coming out gibberish. You couldn't express yourself. You're very blessed that you've really have recovered. A lot of that has to do with your good health as well. So tell me, you were struggling. God bless your boyfriend. He was taking care of you. What would you have done had he not been there?
I'm not entirely sure. I don't know. I would have found a way because that's what I do, and I would have had no choice, but I'm not sure. I really don't know.
I was just curious if there was a plan in place because for you if something had happened. Now, here you are 3 years later, and you're still struggling with your own health. I think that many people don't understand that many caregivers out there are doing just that. They have their own chronic illness, their own mental health issues, as well as physical illness, and they're providing care for a family member 24/7. As well as some of them have kids at home, such as you've got a teenager. On top of it, you were trying to work. You were trying to get back to work, and many caregivers are. What are you doing to take care of yourself? Because I tell my caregivers, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And you have to pace yourself because this could go on for 20, 30 years, your caregiving journey. What are you doing to take care of yourself to continue to provide care?
I learned early on in this particular healing journey, because this is my brain. Now, I've been dealing with Dad's Alzheimer's, and prior to that, I dealt with my late mother-in-law's brain cancer. I've watched what can happen to the human brain. Now, as I find it fascinating, it's also scary and sad. I wanted to take care of my brain. I know that I need to heal my brain. So sleep is important, very important. I get to sleep at night at a normal time. I'm doing some studying now, so I'm up a little later, but I manage that by sleeping in a little bit later, just by an hour or so than my normal schedule. And I take a nap when I feel like I need to when I know Dad's had lunch and he's relaxed after lunch and he's watching a movie and playing his Sudoku, I can rest for an hour or so and not be missed. Or if he's out with a friend, I can sack out on the couch for a while. So sleep is priority number one. You got to make sure you're well rested. There's so many big and little things to do for yourself, but sleep is the number one priority. You got to rest your brain, you got to rest your body, and you got to rest your soul. Or if you don't do all of those things, you're not going to survive. I take time in the morning over my cup of coffee to get my day started, go through my Facebook and Instagram.
So you adjust your time to allow yourself the luxury of having me time at least a little bit every day.
Yes. And I have periods of it built in over coffee in the morning, a couple days a week. If I need to, I know I can take a nap. And then in the evening, Dad gets picked up by a friend every night. So I have guaranteed me time at night. No matter what I do at that time is a different story. Sometimes I have to do housework, or I need to study, or I need to do other work. But sometimes I can just relax and goof off. And sometimes I'll see a friend or I'll video chat with a friend. But every day you need to unwind.
Yes, I think that one of the biggest things is caregivers feel like they have no choice in what they do, when they do it, and how they do it. And many feel stuck. I think that one of the things that you're saying here is, here you are, you're trying to heal your body and provide care for your dad. And caregiving is intermittent and it is unpredictable. So you have to grab those moments of time for yourself. Now, you do something that I get a giggle over. You actually have a virtual cock with a friend, which you mentioned in one of our previous talks. I love that because we need to socialize as well, and we're exhausted. You can't keep giving and not replenish your heart, your soul, and rejuvenate yourself. I think that one of the things that I loved is that you and your friend have this regular time where you sit and have your little happy hour type thing.
We love it. The last time we did wasn't too long ago, and it filled what was happening in her life, and it's good. It is fun.
What's nice about that relationship is that you've met, Beverly is actually from a caregiving group, correct?
Correct. We met online when I first started taking care of my father, and I met her in an Alzheimer's caregiving group. She is another person who really understands what's going on. Not everybody is going to understand what you're dealing with, but is going to understand that not everybody's going to understand your responsibilities or why you're tied to the house. We call it living under the dome being the house, the job, but she absolutely does, 100%. So if I've been stuck, she gets it.
The beauty about that is she's in her after caregiving journey. The person she cared for, Joyce, I believe, was her mother-in-law.
Yep.
And she's passed. She's no longer with us. Is that correct?
That's correct, a couple years ago.
So Beverly has moved on. I think one of the nice things about your relationship is she reminds you that there is life after caregiving. And we should be preparing for that now.
That's also something that's important to think about at some point while you're actively caregiving. Started to do that myself. One thing that I realized was important as part of self-care is to find a hobby, find something that you're good at. I decided I was good at making jewelry. That's picking up a little bit, and I'm also studying for my death doula certification, which we'll talk about at another point in time. I'll have at the end, when he's gone, I'll be able to really get into something that I'm passionate about.
Yes. I love that you're doing that. I love that you don't feel like you're going to be stuck. You still see a future. And that's hard for many. A true story I'm going to share with you is I have many caregivers that have been under terrible amounts of stress. One of the stories that I find enlightening to me, I'll tell you about the ones that I've lost over the years, but the one that I got the biggest giggle over is I had a 70-some-year-old caregiver who's been caring for her mother who turned 104 recently. She calls me up and says, I've decided, now she's been taking care of her mom for 30 years. She says, I've decided that it's my time to live. She's 75. I have to put mom in an assisted living. An assisted living, not even a nursing home at this point in time. She says, I deserve a life of my own. It took her 30 years to get to that point. One of the things I do is tell caregivers, you have rights. You have a right to your own life. You have a right to outside friendships. You have a right to so many things. Many caregivers don't think that they deserve anything or should even consider anything other than the person they're caring for, and even not taking care of themselves. So when I heard this, I thought, oh my, but people don't understand. Retirees are taking care of aging parents. We're living to be 100 or older now. Some of us are healthy, some of us are not. My grandmother lived to be 98. All my little aunts, I call them little because they were just tiny women. They were my great aunts. They dressed to the nines. They had their hair done every week. They had makeup on. In fact, my Aunt Betty came to my grandmother's funeral. She was in her 90s wearing heels. Oh, God bless her. Was tone deaf, could not hear a thing. He screamed at her to talk to her. She was too vain to wear hearing aids. Was a beautiful woman. Her granddaughter took care of her and my 3 little aunts until they passed, and they all lived well into their 90s. And the granddaughter is the one that gave up her life to help take care of them. So I'm proud of you, actually, number one, trying to take care of yourself and seeing the importance of it.
Thank you.
So you do the jewelry, you're doing a podcast for me, which is getting out there and getting known, and you're studying to be a death doula. Your dad's still very social. He does have dementia.
Yes.
Is a slowly progressive form of dementia. So he's still able to get out. What are your plans to continue to do self-care as he declines? Have you had conversations about placing him? Have you set boundaries or limits, or have you thought about that?
Yes, I have my limits. I know when the symptoms will be too much for me to handle. I know he doesn't have any hands-on needs. He's continent. He doesn't need help dressing. He doesn't need help in any of those areas. I just need to make sure he's appropriately dressed, not wear a parka in summer and stuff like that. So as long as he can help himself in those regards, I'm fine. His way home where he lives, so he can walk down the street. His doctors are aware, and I have fail-safes put in place as backup. So that's fine. He still can debate politics with the best of them. It's very hard to describe my father and his symptoms, but those are pretty much the big ones. And once he starts forgetting our names, mine and my daughter, there's certain things that I just won't be able to handle, and I do have my boundaries now.
One of the things that I think that caregivers are very hesitant, I will say, is to set limits and boundaries and express those limits and boundaries. Like, your dad's still able to do a lot for himself. There could be a time, not that it's going to be your dad, but there's going to be a time where a father can become sexually inappropriate. It's very hard for the female caregiver, the daughter, or even the wife to handle sometimes. They can be aggressive. People with dementia can become very aggressive, paranoid. That's a very challenging issue to deal with for many caregivers. I think caregivers make promises like, I'm going to keep you at home, Dad. I'm going to do this. I won't put you in a nursing. They don't realize that when they're making these promises, they don't know what they're promising because they don't know the future. I think that a lot of self-care has to revolve around taking care of yourself and thinking about what you can do, what you can't do, what you're able to handle, and what you're able to deal with, and not force yourself into a situation where you feel like you can't get out.
If I can't do it, it's of no service.
This is where caregiver guilt, caregiver anger, frustration, caregiver regret, those are all issues that a caregiver deals with. And self-care means putting yourself first. And it's not being selfish. It's just a necessary part of being human if you can't deal with it. And I think many of caregivers have a difficult time having that conversation, saying, I can't do this anymore. I thought I could, but I can't. I'm tired. I need help in the house. If you won't let help in the house, then you need to be placed. And I think caregivers get a lot of guilt over that, which is, I just covered this on another podcast. It's such a wasted and negative emotion. But all the good we do, caregivers actually feel guilty about taking care of themselves.
Caregiver guilt is so real. And yeah, I would feel guilty about taking a shower too long. Sometimes I still do. It's because you're not there. You're not right there. What if, God forbid, I was in the shower too long and he wandered? I couldn't imagine that. Or he choked on a grape. Or all these tales. That would be the one time he turned the stove on and boom, the house would explode. Really fantastical tales. That's things that he would do. He doesn't even notice the stove anymore. He's like, why do I gotta cook? You cook for me. That's logical. You really can't go wrong with that. And even eating sometimes. I could be doing the dishes right now. I haven't done them in 2 days. Stuff of that nature, or the laundry needs to be switched over. I can do that right now. Or even sometimes I really need a shower. I should skip this dinner because his schedule is so regimented that sometimes you have to swap out a meal for a shower. And that's not only him, it's all people that you're caring for. Their schedules usually are.
One of the things I want our caregivers to know out there is they're not alone. What they're doing, it may not be healthy and well for them, and dishes may have to wait. Laundry may have to wait. Cleaning the house may have to wait if it means that you get some time to just take a breath. I also tell people to look for resources. There are resources out there, especially for veterans, where people will come and clean. The community, if you can qualify for things like having somebody come in and bring food in or cook or help with the shower or whatever. It just depends on your community and what's available. And again, churches. I know more and more churches are having parish nurses. If you're a religious person and you have a need to have communion or have a visit from the church, no matter what denomination you are, call that church and tell them, I need some support here. The communities are more likely to ignore the elderly than the youth in their community, but it's the elderly that are tithing, it's the elderly that are paying for things in a lot of churches. Caregivers, in order to take care of themselves, oftentimes have to ask for outside help, and that's hard for a lot of them.
It's hard for a lot of caregivers because they're afraid, we're afraid of the scrutiny that we're put under. If you're asking for help, then that must mean that things are worse than it appears. It may mean that we're looked at as incompetent, and we don't want to be looked at like that.
Yes. That's a very good point. And so many caregivers are afraid to ask because they're afraid to get turned down. Lord knows you've got the uninvolved siblings and family members who are judging you in every turn. They're not willing to give up their time, energy, or effort. I think there's times when you just have to say, if you think you can do this better than me, come and do it for a day. Come and do it for a week. Help me. And, you know, even if it's just asking for, can you bring us meals once in a while? Can you help with the laundry? Can you help with the grocery shopping? Caregivers need to learn to reach out to others, even if they don't want to, even if they think that people are judging them. It's for their own mental health and survival.
It is. It really is. I've been under a lot of scrutiny from family members and outside help. Not help, but outside well-meaners, well-wishers, we'll say. I'm a little numb to it now at this point. I'm a little past it. I don't really care that much anymore, because you got to remember that the only thing that really matters is your loved one's health and happiness. If at the end of the day they're going to bed healthy and happy, and you're going to bed healthy and relatively happy, then you've done your job. You did what you committed to do, and that is to keep your loved one healthy and happy, as well as keeping yourself healthy and happy as possible while doing this, because it is not for the faint of heart. It is not for the weak. It's not for everybody, we'll say.
No, and I will tell you, caregiver stress kills. I lose several caregivers a year to death or to a serious illness that keeps them from taking care of their family member. And the family member that they're caring for is still alive and needs care. And on that note, today we're going to end. And as always, I want my caregivers to remember you are the most important part of the caregiving equation. And without you, it all falls apart. Please practice self-care every day. Be gentle with yourself, because you are worth it. Alycia, thank you so much for sharing. And we're going to be talking a lot more about you, your caregiving journey, and about how you take care of yourself, because you're managing a chronic medical condition yourself. I applaud you for what you're doing while you're providing care for your dad. So I look forward to next week when we talk. Have a good day till next time.
You too, Diane. Thank you.
All right.